Hello and welcome to another edition of Boilers Extra. I am Nathan Baird from the Indianapolis Star, flying solo this week. I am in the western suburbs of Chicago. Just got done with, earlier today, done with basketball media day. The women were held up here yesterday. I was up here on Thursday for the men, talking to Matt Painter, Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Caleb First, and some coaches and players from around the Big Ten. So always an interesting day to kind of maybe the official seems like the official start of the season in some ways. We're going to talk basketball, but we're going to get into football first. Before that, even though, a little piece of news: Sam King is a father now. He and his wife Lauren, proud parents. I don't have a lot of details, the tale of the tape, that sort of thing. I'm sure Sam will put that out if he hasn't already. But congrats to them, and everything seems to be going well. So Sam's going to be off for a few weeks, I think, as we've told people, while they get settled in with their first child. And that'll be me doing this throughout the week, and may bring in some help, may bring in some guests, that sort of thing. Just this was one of those weeks where the overlap between football and basketball got a little bit crazy. So it's going to be just me tonight, and we might be on a little bit of the short side for this episode. But we did have an episode earlier this week talking about the first major news of the week for Purdue football, which was the firing of Graham Harrell and the promotion of Jason Simmons. Was able to talk to Jason Simmons. I'm just going to run through several things that have happened news-wise this week. Was able to talk to Jason Simmons on Wednesday, and a guy you could tell that 24 years as a high school coach. He was a high school coach as recently as 2 years ago, then went to Miami of Ohio, which was his alma mater, to coach running backs, and then came to Purdue as an analyst. And at that time was not thinking that was a move that was going to have him in the offensive coordinator seat 4 games into the season, 5 games into the season. But here we are. And as we had been talking, kind of leading up to things, there wasn't necessarily an obvious experienced hand for Ryan Walters to turn to if they were going to move on from Graham Harrell and turn things over to somebody. And from talking to Jason Simmons, from talking to other people in the program, I do think there's a belief that just with his extensive head coaching background, it's not that being a high school head coach gives you this great offensive schematic insight, especially when you're going up against guys at the college level, the Power 5 college level, Power 4, who've been doing this for a while. I think it's more about his makeup, his attention to detail. He's a meticulous guy. He's a diligent guy. He's going to have a seriousness of purpose. He's someone that the players, even in those 9 months, had gained a respect for. Gus Hartwood was talking about how there was a period of time where he did some stuff with the O-line during preseason camp, just filling in for someone. And just in those, few practices, 4 practices, something like that, Gus Hartwood felt that he gleaned both just the knowledge that Jason Simmons has, and his ability to that he wasn't relegated to like one identity. He's been mostly working with the receivers. He's had his own specific things that he has to do with the game plan each week, but Gus Hartwig saw that he was someone who was a pretty well-rounded offensive mind. And it's more, I think, just the fact that he has commanded a room, has commanded a program, a big high school program. Although, frankly, in a state like Indiana, it's not like you're competing with. It's not like you were a football head coach in a big football state, frankly. But I don't think it's necessarily an X's and O's thing. I think it's more an organizational thing than not wanting to take one of the position coaches who also has never been a college offensive coordinator and throw this on top of their position duties. So we talked, Sam and I, pretty in depth about that on the Monday podcast, kind of the special one that we put up. So you can go back there and listen to more of that. I did see Jamal Edrin practicing on Wednesday. When I say practicing, I mean working out in some capacity in pads. I was told he was also there Tuesday, but hadn't really done anything. Wednesday was his first time returning to activity. I did not look at him and say, boy, that looks like he's going to play on Saturday at Wisconsin. I think that might be still too soon. Ryan Walters had said it was going to be 3 to 4 weeks, and that was coming out of Oregon State. So that's only one game removed from where we are now. So that might be a little fast to expect him back Saturday, but he is at least, as of Wednesday, was getting active. And obviously, this offense needs any help it can get as far as personnel. Um, the line on this game opened at 10, Wisconsin, a 10-point favorite. It's now in the like 13 and a half, 14 range. And as far as I can tell, there's only been two pieces of news that have come out this week that would potentially affect it. One just happened today, and the line had already grown, so that it didn't apply to this. But Chaz Malusi, the uh, leading running back for Wisconsin. And Purdue fans might remember in 2021, he ran for about 150 yards and a touchdown against Purdue. Last year, suffered a season-ending injury against Purdue, like really messed up his ankle. I think it had basically a reconstruction in the offseason. He today, it was announced, is stepping away from the team because his injury, whatever was physically going wrong with him, just hasn't been responding. So that's one more chief offensive player for Wisconsin that goes down, and for an offense that frankly has not been good. This is a bad offense. It has been. You go back and if you go and sort, there's a great site for people who don't know, CFB Stats. If you're just looking for like big volume, basic stats about just every team in the country, it's a great site for that. You can go there and you can filter out and just go by the FBS numbers. So I've been trying to do that when I've been comparing things with Purdue because it takes away that Indiana State game. And I didn't look up to see if Wisconsin had played a FCS team, but I actually think they have. I think they have also only played 3 FBS games. But I can go down this list and tell you points per game. This is Wisconsin's ranked nationally. Points per game, 95th. Yards per play, 109th. Quarterback efficiency, 115th. Remember, there's only 134 teams. So they're in the bottom quartile at best in some of these things. First downs, 83rd. Third down percentage, 79th. Red zone appearances, 92nd. And plays of 10 plus yards, 110th. Now, that all of which would make this, I think, potentially the most vulnerable Wisconsin team Purdue has played in I don't know how long, maybe the entirety of this 17-game losing streak that Purdue has against Wisconsin that dates back to the fumble in 2004. It's just a bad off. It's just a really bad college football offense. And they did play, Alabama in there, but I don't think that one single performance is what's pulling them down here. There's been other bad performances mixed in here. The problem is that as vulnerable as they are, as bad as they are offensively, Purdue is worse in every single one of those rankings of every single stat that I just read. Every single one of those stats, Purdue ranks even lower in the national rankings, which in some cases is really hard. I mean, when the team you're playing is 115th in quarterback efficiency and you're lower, they're 110th in yards, plays of 10 plus yards, you're lower. It's kind of a remarkable feat. Now, there are 2 exceptions, slight exceptions. Plays of 20 plus yards, plays of 30 plus yards. Wisconsin's actually worse. Wisconsin is tied for last in the country. They only have 4 plays this year of 20 plus yards. I think that is, again, a good sign for Purdue that this is not the Wisconsin of old, that this is a vulnerable Wisconsin team. And now, especially if you're taking Chaz Malusi out of the mix. Because he has been an experienced, productive back in the past. Now, injury issues have been there. He has not been that good this year. He factors into some of this lack of explosiveness, and that's why he's stepping away because his body's not right. But it tells you that this is not a Wisconsin team that is primed to come in and just break off long runs, and we've all seen that over the years, depending on just a long line of running backs that have come through Wisconsin and done that, not just to Purdue, but to a lot of teams. So it's there for the taking, I think, if Purdue wants it. but I don't know if just this one shakeup on offense is going to be enough when you go on the road to a place like Camp Randall Stadium, and who knows which of your offensive personnel are going to be available, and to be able to get over the top. I just don't think that there is reason to have that confidence in this offense right now. So my pick for this game is going to be Wisconsin 30, Purdue 20. That's kind of high scoring for um, as bad of these two offenses that I just read off with all these stats. But I also think that these are also two defenses that are not super consistent, and I don't know that either of these defenses are so strong that they're going to come in and just shut the other team down. So something I think the what I'm kind of focusing on more though is that I think this is a game that, again, from a talent perspective, Purdue should be in this game. Purdue should be within reach in this game. This Wisconsin roster is not significantly better than Purdue's roster. It may be better at the end of the day, but it's not in a different plane of existence as it often has been in the past. It's probably very frustrating right now if you're on the Purdue coaching staff, because I think you probably looked ahead to this game. If you thought this team could get off to a 3-1 start, and as we talked about, if they had just been as mid offensively as they were last year in the past 2 weeks, they might be 3-1 right now going to Wisconsin. Just try to imagine yourself as a Purdue fan from that mindset. You just watched Purdue start the year 3-1, and now you're going up to Wisconsin with these offensive numbers on, because Purdue's offensive numbers would be different, but Wisconsin's would be the same in this alternate universe that we're imagining. And that's the team that you're about to face. You're thinking this is the end of the 17-game losing streak, probably. But I just don't think there's any reason right now to think that just because they switched up from Graham Harrell, who is a very experienced college offensive coordinator and has even had some successful stints in the past, to Jason Simmons, who's going to be doing it for the first time, that alone shakes things up. Maybe it does. Maybe it's just the jolt that they needed. Maybe it just scrambles things the right way, or takes out whatever blinder was causing this offense to just be sort of stuck in quicksand. But it's hard to like bank on that, right? So I think it's a game that Purdue can be in the mix. I just don't know if it can get over the top. I'm going to take Wisconsin. It'll be closer to where this line opened. I think the reason it's pulled away is it just the combination of maybe the Graham Harrell news and causing this line to get a little bit bigger. There was another piece of news that happened, or two pieces of news that happened with Purdue this week, though, and I think it definitely deserves some discussion before we get into basketball. On Monday, one of the only receiver commit in this 2025 class for Purdue, LeBron Hill from Hammond Morton, decommitted, and that the rumblings of that had started over the weekend. I think they knew going into that Nebraska game, if things didn't start to look better, that might happen. And then the firing of Graham Harrell happens, and I had asked Ryan Walters on Monday when he was talking about the Graham Harrell firing, and they can't talk about even guys who have committed at that point until they've signed. Like, they're not allowed to by NCAA rule. And so sometimes it can be hard to ask coaches to tell you what they're telling people that they can't talk to you about. But I asked, Graham Harrell wasn't just the offensive coordinator. He was the quarterback's coach. He was a big reason why the people who are either in this program, and that includes Hudson Card, that includes Marco Stabile. Like, he's a reason why those guys are here. He's a reason why the guys who've committed to Purdue are committed to Purdue. He was the chief recruiter on those guys. And so what message did Ryan Walters have for them about kind of securing the future? And, he kind of gave an answer. He's been transparent and honest with the quarterbacks, and he went and talked to them, and, they understood. They were sad for Graham, but they understand why it's happening, and they're excited about where they can still go, and they trust him. And that's all well and good, but I was not surprised at all that then Wednesday night, the word gets out, or I guess he released the word. He released the word. The word got out because he said the words. Oscar Rios, the Downey, California quarterback, 4-star, top 300 quarterback, announced he was reopening his commitment and his recruitment, I should say, and decommitting. And he thanked a lot of Purdue coaches in his statement that he made on social media, but also did specifically mention Graham Harrell for, I think you said, for believing in him, something along those lines. Like, it was clear that there was a connection there. My conversations, I think Purdue thought it was going to have to fight to keep him. And regardless of, I think, maybe of what happened this season, if this had unfolded more along the lines of what people thought it might be, which is somewhere in that 4 to 6 win range, it still was going to be, I think, hard to keep him. Um, Partially because, and it's not because I don't, he was committing, it sounds like, for the right reasons, but two things. Number one, he's a West Coast guy. So, he's not coming here during his season, probably for any kind of a visit. It's just hard to get from California to Indiana when you're playing a high school season. You're not flying on Fridays, you're playing Friday nights, right? So it's hard sometimes to get those. And when I asked Ryan Walters a few weeks ago about, frankly, I was going to be writing sort of about how big it was that they had Oscar Rios and like a bigger sort of like trending topic story. And I asked him if he had altered, if the expansion of the Big Ten made them look any differently about West Coast recruiting. And he pretty much flatly shot it down. It was like, no, like, you just can't, the resources you have to spend and time to go out there, it isn't worth it because you're passing up maybe multiple guys. You're literally flying over guys you can get. You'll take shots at guys on the West Coast. It's really tough. And you have to really be someone special, or someone, probably more importantly, with a connection to Purdue or a connection to Indiana, the state of Indiana, to go spend that kind of recruiting capital to go get them. And I thought that was an answer that made sense, but someone of Oscar Rios' talent was worth that, and that's why they had gone and done that and locked him or gotten the commitment from him. He's at this, beyond just being a West Coast guy, though. He's also, his profile's rising. Like, he's a top 20 quarterback in this class by the consensus of the various recruiting sites. Other teams were going to come after him. Probably teams from the West Coast. If it starts to be a thing where you get offered by someone of Purdue's caliber or better, and it's right there in your backyard, do you start to have second thoughts? So I'm told they're going to keep recruiting him, but it may be an uphill battle at this point, depending on what they do at offensive coordinator. And it's a big loss for that class, because when you looked into the future, you could say, well, 4-8 wasn't a great start. This season's obviously not exactly taking off, and 2025 schedule doesn't look a lot easier. And you're going to have a first-year starting quarterback no matter who it is. Like, there's a lot of things that are iffy about 2025, but at least you saw the long term here as getting brighter, right? Like, and partially because you had Oscar Rios anchoring that 2026 class, and that's no longer the case. He's not in that class, and frankly, from his perspective, you start thinking about getting here in 2026. Do you know if anyone on the staff is here in 2026? If things keep going at this trajectory, it's a worthwhile question to ask yourself if you're that quarterback. And Purdue, I think, hoped that it would build some momentum early this season, setting Rios aside, but you could get a couple wins early on, and they had the winnable games right there. Again, imagine if you're 3-1 right now, you just beat Nebraska. Graham Harrell still on the site, still on the staff, and I think Oscar Rios is still committed to Purdue at this point. But they thought that they could get some wins early on, and then they could start to flip some guys that they've been in the mix on, and that they might be able to get the pull over. And that's just harder when you're, I mean, I just read you the list of what they've done on offense, and it's probably a bit of a hard sell for some guys right now. So this is something to keep our eye on, especially as it relates to 2025 guys, because And Hill was a 2025 guy, Rios 2026, but Hill was going to be in this next recruiting class, a guy that they had flipped from Louisville, and now it's two big hits to their recruiting commitment base that were lining up over the next 2 years. Speaking of recruiting, I'm going to try to get to a football game while I'm up here because I've got this extra day to spend between Big Ten Media Days and going up to Wisconsin for the game. I'm going to try to get over to Plainfield High School and see a guy named Kavion Lee, an offensive tackle, offensive lineman, a guy who was originally committed to Northern Illinois and backed off of that. But a lot of teams interested in him, other Big Ten teams, Kansas State, just some decent programs interested in this guy. He's playing a game here in this neck of the woods. I'm going to try to get over there and see him Friday night and before I head up towards Wisconsin. So I'll let you know if I see anything interesting there. But moving on to basketball, you know, just such a complete opposite of things. In fact, maybe we should start with recruiting just to get this out of the way. Purdue had not had a commitment yet for this 2025 class that's going to be coming in next year, and it's going to be a small class, we think, regardless. But they got the first commitment. It's Antoine West, Toledo Whitmer guard in the 2025 class, 3-star, top 175 kind of guy. Good scorer, has also run the point for Whitmer and been a distributor there, and it seems like a very solid guard and a guy with some upside, but a guy who does the things that Purdue needs its guards to do in this system. Probably some growth that still needs to come on defense, but also a guy who was not a great shooter early in his career from some of the things I was reading, and has, the past 2 years, I think he was 41% as a sophomore, 36% as a junior. So still some work to probably do there, but someone who has put in the work and has been a winner at the high school level, took his team to the Final Four. So that's the first shoe to fall for 2025. It remains to be seen if other shoes will fall. I'd originally been told that Purdue was sort of focusing on the front court for this class, and then because the NCAA expanded the scholarship limits from 13 to 15, Matt Painter being on the various committees that he's on, I think they knew that was coming. It allowed them to pivot a little bit earlier and expand to where they were going to take someone, a guard, a backcourt guy, and that's where West ended up coming into play. Now, they still have a couple guys that they're pursuing as forwards, but I don't think there's necessarily a lot of momentum right now in Purdue's favor. Trey Singleton is a guy, he's visited a couple of times. He was here earlier this football season for a weekend. It's pretty much down to him, Northwestern, Virginia. I don't know that Purdue thinks it is leading in that situation right now, but obviously still some room to change it. Sebastian William Adams, a kid from Houston, another power forward kind of guy. Purdue has also had him in, but there's also a lot of other sort of like Big 12-ish, like old Big 12. So, I think Texas A&M's in the mix, one of the Oklahoma schools in the mix, maybe Kansas is in the mix. Like there's some teams that are a little bit more regionally adjacent to him that are involved. And I think Purdue is not dissatisfied with where it is in relation to the 2025 class. You just brought in a 5-man freshman class. Matt Painter said today at Big Ten Media Days that there's a couple of guys in that group that could potentially redshirt. So that's your 2025 freshman just getting bumped back a year from in this class in some ways. And, they've got some other front court guys that are pretty young, right? Whether that's Raleigh Burgess coming in with this freshman class, a handful of other guys and that are in that sort of 3-4 mix. And it gives them some room to play with, I think, here and look ahead then to 2026. Because I think they think that 2026 is just a more talented group and there may be more bang for their buck in that group. Now, I think if either Singleton or Williams Adams jumped and took the scholarship, I think they'd take them. But I also think that if it doesn't come to fruition, that it may not be a make or break proposition from from Purdue's standpoint. And this may end up just being a one-man class with that caveat that one or two guys that just came in this year might be candidates for red shirts, which has obviously worked out pretty well for Purdue in recent years. Purdue was, one of the featured teams, obviously, at Big Ten Media Days. A lot of talk about Purdue just because they are the two-time defending champion. They get to the national championship game last year. More to the point, they're been voted the preseason favorite in a couple of polls, including the one that we did, the USA Today Network. Number one on that list, and Braden Smith is everybody's preseason player of the year. And obviously those topics are coming up in both realms. Both Painter and Smith said some version of, that's fun, that's nice, but doesn't mean anything. Painter's a pretty blunt guy, as you all know. And basically I was asking about Braden Smith. He's like, well, I mean, he was the best returning player. Like, there's and anymore, that's not even necessarily saying a lot, because all of these teams and all the teams that are up at the top, whether it's Illinois, Indiana, all the teams that are considered contenders, they've all got and there's a lot of, actually, a good handful of teams I think people think could be contenders. Everybody's bringing in transfers. Everybody's got new guys that are going to be crucial to what sort of success they have this year as a team. Purdue being the exception to that. Purdue with no transfers this year. Although Matt Painter's saying, don't, he's getting a lot of credit for that right now. Like, oh, just they've had 2 transfers in 4 years, and he was saying today, like, well, that's not going to last. Like, you can't keep 13 people that happy, or 15, however many it's going to be now. You're going to lose somebody at some point, and that'll give you the freedom to go get someone else. So, but just a lot of like seriousness of purpose for Purdue, and I've seen it when they're out there practicing. It's just sort of a team that is, I think, sure of itself at the same time that it's trying to figure itself out, which is an interesting dynamic. A lot of talk today from Painter about what's going on, trying to figure lineups out. He was talking today about when Trey Kaufman-Renn plays the 5, it would be Cam Heide at the 4. And I talked to Kaufman-Renn about that. He said he also had been sort of lobbying for that, had seen in the scrimmages and open gyms and stuff that they do that he thinks that Heide is physical enough to play down there. He is not of conventional power forward size, I would say, to the point where Matt Painter sort of refers to him as a 3-and-D kind of guy. But Kaufman thinks he is physical enough and can rebound enough to be the guy that they use at the 4 in small ball lineups. I think his point being that, like, there's a lot of, everybody would like to play small ball, but that who you get at the 4 is a pretty crucial thing. Do you truly have a guy who is more of a wing who can handle the 4? And he's kind of putting his support behind Heide being a guy who can do that. My question is, and from talking to just some other observers here at Big Ten Media Day, is how much will they use that small ball lineup, and how much will Matt Painter, because they've had such great success with a conventional big man look, and you've got a couple of those guys, Daniel Jacobson and Will Berg. Will Berg looked good in practice last week. They are very high on Daniel Jacobson and where he's going eventually. And how much will they still want to just try to get that mix? It's not a mix that's going to replicate what Zach Edey did, because no one can replicate some of the things he did. But it's still been the basis of this program now for a while. And are they going to be okay with that, with straying from that? Or if there's enough of it there, are they going to still try to make that a priority? I think that remains to be seen. And a lot of talk today about still just like trying different lineups and seeing what works the best. And are you going to, is Painter, like, in my mind, what's been intriguing about this team is, if you want to, you don't have to settle on one lineup. You've got different lineups that allow you to dictate the terms to whatever team you're playing. You find the one thing that they're weak at, and you can put out you've got the combinations. You can do the little, just twist it around, and and try to just hit at that one thing that they don't do as well, or take advantage of the one guy that the one position that they're especially vulnerable. Um, and it sounds like Matt Painter thinks along those lines a little bit because he's going down a long list of they're still playing Lawyer and Smith and Coffin Wren together in practice a lot, and then just mixing and matching around that, just trying to find different combinations and talking about how well Fletcher Lawyer's going to play the two in this situation, but he'll also play the three. It depends on what Miles Colvin's doing, what Jakari Harris is doing, other guards are doing, and who else they have on the floor at that time. And to me, that sounds like a really just intriguing concept that a team's and you go from one year where you have an identity that's so built around one guy to another year where your identity is that you have no identity. That's the kind of thing that sports writers like to think about because it makes for fun, like narratives or whatever. It's not how obviously Matt Painter's thinking about it, and maybe this does get whittled down to where there's some separation and six guys are the ones who deserve to be playing the bulk of these minutes, but he's saying that right now that there isn't that separation, that it's still it's pretty tight and they're just getting really good competition in practice, which also is making them better in the long run. Also was talking to just some people, and I've heard this now from a couple, Matt Painter has been very uh, overly, I don't know if overly optimistic, but very optimistic about what Trey Kaufman Wren can do this year, talking about how he should be an all Big Ten caliber player. He said something similar to that during the little panel discussions that they were having today at Big Ten Media Day, which was people at home probably watching that probably got some value out of it. I don't think any single reporter in the room did. We would rather been doing interviews and learning, getting some information, but no, he's been so excited about that. I had heard, and I think um, it might have been Trakoff and Wren who had told me. No, it wasn't Trakoff and Wren because it's about Trakoff and Wren. I can't remember now who it was that told me. It might have been Braden Smith that they had seen Trakoff and Wren, going up against Zach Edey in practice in recent years and being able to score on Zach Edey and being able to do things against him. Somebody I talked to today used the term dominated Edey in practice. Now, I think they're probably talking from an offensive standpoint for the most part, and that's the matchup that Matt Painter likes there. His quickness and other abilities matched up with a conventional big, and where he can take advantage of that. Now, obviously the other component to that though is where they're going to miss Zach Edey more is not just the scoring, and the scoring's big when you have that many automatic points under the basket every game. It changes a lot of things. And I'm not saying they won't miss his scoring, but the rebounding is going to be huge. And where else do they get rebounding? When you start talking about playing Fletcher Lawyer at the 3 and Camden Heide at the 4, is that getting you enough defensive rebounding at the end of the day? And is that going to affect what kind of lineups that Matt Painter plays? Because you all know that defense and rebounding are a big part of how he sets a team up out there. But at the same time, I've heard that now enough from enough people, and I wasn't here watching practice the last few years, as you all know. So I didn't get to see these battles, but that's multiple people have talked about it that way now, and some of them are people inside the program, but it's not Matt Painter and Trey Wren telling me that. It's other people who were involved or who were observing who said that they've seen that. So just something to keep in mind that I think I've talked to some people who maybe express some skepticism about where Trey Kaufman Wren is athletically and whether he's dynamic enough to be to overcome to not just be able to take advantage of those 5 matchups, but what are you doing at the 4 when you're matched up more one-on-one? Like what do you in somewhat a like physical matchup? Are you able to take advantage of that? Do you have enough of the shooting skills? All those things, but this is what they want to do with it. They want to get the times in games where they can put him up against a 5 and as long as he's defending and rebounding enough to make it worthwhile, they can really get a big advantage of it and under the basket at the other end. But one of the many things that it remains to be seen, and we're still a few weeks away from that season, from the games actually starting in that season, but not that many. It's coming up on us fast, and I'm still really excited to watch this team more. I'm watched this team for a long time when I was here before, and then you take my 5 years off. I was exclusively doing football stuff because you all know Ohio State is a pretty big football operation, and now to get kind of back in the swing of to just sort of reintroduce myself to Purdue basketball with all new faces on the floor, not so much in the coaching staff, but on the floor, and kind of learning more about each of these games. It's just been, and the games each of these players have, I should say. And I'm really excited still to sort of watch how this comes together. They're going to have, an early game against Alabama that could tell them some things. I think this exhibition against Creighton is going to tell them some things, give them an idea of where they're at, where they need to go, where they could be headed. But I just think there's a lot. It's so strange to have a team that is so revered now. And I was talking to someone else. It was Bruce Weber, was there for doing some work with Big Ten Network and had been at some Purdue practices over the summer. And we were just sort of chatting about them being number one in the preseason poll. And I made the comment, and he agreed with it, that like it seemed more like a program vote, that it's not just that. It's not people just saying, well, they're defending champ, because people do vote like this in polls and they're stupid. Because we don't need you to vote if this is how you're going to do it. You're not going to put any like critical thinking into it, that whoever won last year until they lose, they get to be the number one team. Terrible concept. That's not what we were seeing, though. We were seeing that people were voting them first because they respect Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn and Fletcher Lawyer, and they respect, more to the point though, they respect Matt Painter. They respect what he's built here and the consistency that's been there. 2 Big Ten championships in a row. They were in the mix before that, pretty late in the season, I think. They've been right there as the almost like the standard bearer in this program now for a few years, and finally had the breakthrough last year. And this seemed like a acknowledgement from the media that covers the conference, I suppose, but just that from everyone at large, and their name was coming up in just the way that some of these coaches are still talking about this league, that right now the Big Ten championship goes through Purdue, and that's just kind of become a state of the baseline expectation right now, is that if you want to win a Big Ten championship, you've got to find a way to get Purdue out of the way so you can win that. And I think that's reflected in this vote, because they don't have Zach Edey. A year ago at this time, you had just like absolute certainty in what this program was. And this year you have, I think, absolute uncertainty, maybe not absolute uncertainty, because 3 of those 5 starters at the very least, but you don't know what this team is going to look like when this season starts, how it's going to be configured. And I don't think, I know, because he's talking about, like, Matt Painter doesn't know yet what it's going to be configured as, but yet still being voted number one in these polls. It tells you just the respect that people have. They don't know how Purdue's going to do it. They just know what, at the end of the day, it's going to be pretty good. And still some people who just like, I know they lost Edey, but man, like they're still going to be really strong. Hearing that just from multiple people today. So right now it's just talk, though. That's what Matt Painter would tell you. And that's what anyone should tell you, that right now it is just a lot of talk, and we'll get into finding out what is actually this team is made of here in a few weeks. So I'm going to shut it down for the day. Thanks for joining us here at Boilers Extra. Just me this week, but us, the greater us, Sam and his expanding family. And he'll be back on here in a few weeks. Until then, I will be live streaming something after the game against Wisconsin on Saturday night. So I'll try to get that link out if people want to watch afterwards. If not, we'll see you here next week on Boilers Extra. Thanks.